Hi, well, welcome everybody to another fierce conversation. I am here with a dear friend of mine, Dena Register, Dr. Dena Register, and we have been in each other's worlds since college. So she is a sorority sister, a fellow Piscean, and woman of the arts. And I think that was one of the reasons why we kind of like fell in love with each other, you know?
Yes.
When we were in the sorority, we had a lot of that in common. And then many years later, we're able to reconnect, you know, and I think it was because of the multiple passions, but part of it was this connection that we have to developing our spirituality, right? As women, as mothers, and as many of you here in Essentially Woo, who are mothers, who have many roles, maybe as business owners or leaders within an organization, you know, mothers, daughters, spouses, oh my goodness, with all these roles, you know, how do we flow in life? How do we find that right recipe that allows us to continue to stretch toward our goals and be able to find some balance and connection to the divine and know that we're on the right track and feel like we're not losing ourselves, but actually
Yes.
taking care of ourselves and doing it in a way that we can be proud, right? So excited that that you're here with me today. And Dena, I want to give you a moment to just introduce yourself to the ladies, however you
Sure.
like.
So yeah, it's funny to me that I was thinking about this before we started talking today. Like I've known you more than half my life. Like it's been a lot of years.
And we're not going to call ourselves old by any means.
No, I prefer, like, I don't know, seasoned, experienced, you know, any of those words I think fit. But so we met in college, and I was a music therapy major in college, and have been a music therapist since my undergraduate experience at Florida State, and worked as a music therapist, but it became more than that. So I ended up going back to FSU, doing the PhD, teaching at the college level, which I love, working with college students. And then a few years ago had kind of a seminal career pivot that was necessitated by a lot of things, and it caused me to question all kinds of things about, you know, life and work, and what's the difference, you know, is there really a work-life balance? Does that even exist? And
Right.
I think the word that keeps coming up is authenticity, you know, like that's so important to me as I have aged. I think it's always been a piece of what has kind of driven my choices and all of that. But it really was this sort of fever pitch of what is this authentic to me? Right. And so it caused a big move and a big, not really a career change necessarily, because I'm utilizing all those same pieces, but the way that I spend my time and who I spend it with and how I spend it has changed and shifted. So now I am part of a company called Enlighten Continuing Education. So we provide right now sort of pandemic driven online continuing education for music therapists, for nurses. We will be offering for social workers as well. And then I do consulting in other realms. And as part of that, picked up I became a Chopra certified meditation teacher. So that's sort of I guess a sidebar that really has come into a more full part of my life in the last coming up on a year now. Yep. So leading meditation, teaching meditation, incorporating sound healing as part of that. And so it's been this really, really interesting ride.
It always is, isn't it? And I think, I would dare to say that almost every woman in this community and what drives us to get more in touch with our spirituality, and however that shows up, right? For me, it started with Chinese face reading, because my son was experiencing some issues very early on in school. I'm talking pre-K.
Yeah.
Because he was highly sensitive and he had such a big open heart. But even at that young age, teachers start judging who they are. They start placing them into boxes. And this incredible seminar that I went to back in the day when Hay House actually had physical conferences,
yes,
taught me that through our face, we could really understand who our children are, why they are the way they are, why they go through what they go through, and just understanding the gifts that they bring to the world. And that was one of the first spiritual practices that I started to learn because of my son. And then many years later, of course, that led to many other things: astrology, feng shui, tarot, et cetera, et cetera. But it's through these moments where we're experiencing a big question, right? For me, it was, how the hell do I support my child and advocate for him, so that he is in the right place and he is loved and cherished for who he is. And for you in that moment, it sounds like it was, holy moly, am I living an authentic life? Am I really doing what's going to bring me joy? Am I living intentionally? Why am I spending time with certain people who don't allow me to live in that space? And I think many of the women in this group have been in that place, are in that place now, are still trying to define what intentional living looks like, what authenticity looks like, and how a spiritual practice or multiple spiritual practices can really help connect us to that. So thank you for bringing that up. And before we get too deep into that, let's go to the core question that I like to ask the women who I have fierce conversations with. And it's, let's talk about a time in your life, it could be that time or a different, where you felt you really had to step up for yourself in a fierce way in order to make a decision, make a change that allowed you to kind of break out of who you were to become, someone else.
Yeah. I think that's definitely a time in my life that I've had to do that. But it's more than that. In the last, it has been just over a year ago that I have two children. My youngest child shared with us that he is transgender. And we hit, it wasn't, so it's interesting, even the fierce, that's a hard word to to embody, I feel like, for me, because I feel very sort of like soft and nurturing. And, and so it's interesting in thinking about,
the light and the dark of that word.
Yes.
And how
do you categorize? Yes.
Yeah.
And everything has, right, the light and the shadow side. Yeah. And it's definitely the light side of that. And so when this child has been a fierce child since birth, like he came into the world as, actually even before, like, my second pregnancy was such a different experience than my first pregnancy. And, funny enough, like, I had heartburn through the entire pregnancy. And so it's funny because, I feel like this has always been there, and your children call out things in you that you need to practice and learn, and or not, it's all choice driven, certainly. So I feel like it has called that up in me, which maybe wasn't so comfortable. And so he let us know for certain there had been signs along the way. So this is a really, I feel like, a very hot topic at the
Yes.
moment, politically and otherwise. And certainly here we are in Pride Month,
Right.
and certainly at his age. So he's 10. But this child has had such a sense of self from the word go.
Mm.
And so it's been a very interesting year of inner fierce conversations,
Yes.
supporting his need to figure out how he wants to be in the world and what that looks like and what's comfortable for him, and then supporting that. And there's, the blessing and the curse of his age, and him really feeling strongly about this at this time, and sharing that. So I think that's the most imminent fears.
Right. No, thank you for sharing that. And you're right. And I really cherish this conversation because I know that one of the things that I experience in the world right now is, listen, we're all in different generations, and
Right.
every generation thinks differently, had different experiences, and they're all okay. And they're all right based on where we were, who we were, how our parents raised us and what was going on in society. And we know that this has happened since the beginning of time. We can go back to every religion, every source of history to find that nothing we're experiencing today is really new. It was just always, it was either hidden or not, allowed or not, right or wrong. And so today, what I've been experiencing is that generation above us not really, just not understanding it at all, not able to be open with it, feeling awkward around these conversations. And I'm sure that you've experienced that, and that's affected part of this journey that you've been on. But I'd like to go back to, because I think that there's probably other mothers in this group that maybe are experiencing this or will experiencing this. And it may be helpful to hear from you, like what were some of the signs that you saw along the way that kind of had you go, what's going on here?
Yes. So just contextually, my oldest child is male, cisgendered male.
Okay.
And so, I'm an only child. So the whole idea of having two children is a wonderment to me, and watching just interactions and how you can have, the same parents and basically the same kind of container, and two completely different humans, So it's fascinating to me. And so there's, there are things that along the way that my husband is one of three. And so there are things along the way that I'm like, just is sort of baffled by. And he's like, no, this is part of having siblings. Like, this is how this works. And so there were very clear signs to me in terms of things that I think people get really uptight about: clothing, about hairstyles, like we all have. I was raised in, I say it kind of a stereotypically Southern household, except my mom is not from the South. My dad is, but there's this like, and maybe it's a, generational kind of thing, like this expectation of, my older son and I now, he's in high school, and we have almost the daily battle during school of, can I wear pajama pants to school? My answer is absolutely not. He doesn't understand why. And that's a holdover, like, it's hard sometimes to kind of logic it out, but, there was an expectation of dressing neat and clean and what you wear to school, and it is decidedly not pajama pants. So there are those kind of things, like there are things around clothes and hair and makeup and whatever that I think we are raised with that sort of condition how we view the world. So in kindergarten, my youngest, we hit the springtime, and there's that point, if you're a mother, you've experienced this thing where your children wake up one day and and literally almost nothing fits, right? They've outgrown every single thing. So all of a sudden you find yourself, investing in a whole new set of clothes for whatever season because nothing fits. So it was that, the spring, and I had 2 spring babies. And so we were going on a birthday clothes shopping trip, and we went into the children's place, and my youngest went in and like completely refused to even try anything on from the side of the store that is what we would consider typically female, right? Like those clothes are not comfortable to me. I don't like how short the shorts are. I don't like the spaghetti, like all of the like things that we have conditioned. So this has been a year of learning too, right? Like over generations, we've conditioned what is feminine, what is female, what like this gender division. And he out of hand was like, yeah, I'm not wearing any of that. And so, there's a little bit of being taken aback. Yeah. But then also, the rule in my house is you must have clothes on your body if you're going out, and they need to be clean. So it was honestly, it wasn't a huge thing for me because it's not a hill I'm going to die on, right. Right. And it's the other thing about it too, I think is having worked with, I love working with college students, yes, particularly undergraduate students, because, and I say this to them, and I always give the caveat to like, hear me out, please don't take offense to this. But there are 2 times in life, in the development that I find incredibly magical. One is young children under the age of about 5. Okay. And the other is that transition from high school to college. Yes. And the similarity is this awe and wonder, and the world is my oyster. Yeah. It's these times in life that there is more readily available a sense of wonderment, a sense of empowerment, a sense of bring it on, inspiration. Yeah. Yes. And to be around that energy is absolutely magical. Yeah. And so having worked with college students, like I've had students in my classes that I have watched transition and tried to be a good steward of, support and allyship and, do it, be authentic. How do you want to show up? How do you perceive yourself, and how do you want to be in the world? So the clothing thing was just not a deal really for me. The bigger deal, I think, was talking with my own mom, with other family members who are like, how come, or, but then empowering my son, who at the time, then there were kids in the neighborhood who were like, "Oh, you look like a boy," and helping him navigate how to respond to that. Having incredible pride at watching my older son step in to that and say, so it was. There were those things that we thought like, okay, is this just a clothing thing, or is this something more? Right. And really didn't, life is busy. So there isn't time to, I'm not really a worrier so much.
Yes. It's like, park it. Let me just park it mentally and see what continues to show.
What happens. Right. Like, I feel like, I have a dear friend who says, we worry in sequence, and we were not to that. There was no need to worry about that. So it was a clothing issue. And so then around that same time, a couple months later, I was traveling a ton for work. I had made a haircut appointment for both kids to go get their haircut with my stylist, who I loved, totally trusted, whatever. And so I said to my husband, can you please get them there to get their haircut? And I get this panicked phone call from my husband saying that, our youngest wants to cut all his hair off. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, okay, what are we talking about? Like shaving his head? Or he's like, no, he wants to have short hair. And I said, okay, well, one of two things is going to happen. Either he's going to hate it and he's going to grow it back out, or he's going to love it and fantastic.
Right.
And I totally trust Jess. And so, look up short haircuts on your phone and let him pick something that he likes, and on we go.
Right.
And so those, I think, are two of the biggest things that people struggle with, that if I'm honest, like, it just was not something I was going to give energy to in terms of being concerned.
And you're also speaking to something that I think, I work with a lot of my clients, which is, we want to flow in life. We want to feel like things are just moving. We don't want to get stuck in things, right? Because when we get stuck, everything kind of falls apart, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like there are many strategies here. First of all, I just think that he picked you guys as parents. I think that's generally what we all do, right? We've got these contracts that we come into this world with, and he definitely chose, the right family and the right parents, and for this incredible transition. But it sounds to me like what you do is something that's sometimes very difficult for a lot of us busy, high achieving women, which is let things go,
Oh yeah.
And it is a strategy. Sometimes it could be a strategy of avoidance, although I don't think that was the case here. It was more of a strategy of, let me worry about it when I absolutely have to. Right now, it's kind of like on a scale from 1 to 10, it's kind of a 3. It's not a 10 yet. So let's talk about, when did it get to that higher level? Like, okay, it's kind of like an 8 to a 10 now. And how did that work for you guys?
It definitely, so at the end of that school year, we actually moved to a new area. And so we arrived, and kids started new schools and all of that, knowing no one. So coming in, clean slate and all of that. And so there were moments of worry, not actually about my child, but about how others were responding. We have been so fortunate that the adults in the schools that my kids have been in have been supportive and great advocates, and like not even needing any labels or anything like that. But so the whole in that first year here, we went to go pick my son up because we were going out of town, we were going to the airport, and I went in, signed him out, and here he comes down the hall with the first grade teacher with him, which I thought, this is weird because the teacher does not bring them out when they're leaving early, right, for the day. And she said, I just want you to know that there was an altercation in the bathroom. And he was, of course, at that time using the girls' bathroom. And there were kids in there that were not in his class who insisted that he was a boy. And when he was like, no, I'm not, this is the bathroom I'm supposed to be in, they just kept insisting. And it was, as you might imagine, really upsetting to him.
Sure.
And so, to be honest, a lot of the issues before he just came out and said, yes, this is who I am, were around going to the bathroom and other kids saying, you're not supposed to be in here, you look like a boy. And which, we could go down a whole rabbit hole with all of that. But so those were moments that it doesn't worry me about him saying to us, that I want to transition. It worries me, the mental health piece of that worries me. The safety piece of that for him worries me. So those were the kinds of things that were upsetting to me. So let me also say, like, there were different times, the summer after the clothing and the hair change, we were at a friend's wedding. And he and I were up early. We were all staying in a hotel, the four of us, and my husband and my older son were still asleep. he and I got up and we had gone down to the Starbucks to get a muffin and coffee. And he passed me this note that he had written. And there was a picture that he had drawn because he was at that time 5. And it said, "I wish I was a boy." And I looked at the picture and I was like, wow, this is a great picture. And I see that you wrote here, that you wish you were a boy. Do you? And and then he was like, no, I don't. And I said, well, here's what I need you to know. We love you. Like, you're not this. This is like a car or a house that your soul travels around in, right? And so however you want that to look is perfect for us. You know, like, that's, you get to make those choices. What really matters is that you're loving and kind and helpful, and you're a good friend, and that you allow people to love you and, you know, to take care of you. And so it doesn't matter to me if that's how, you know, and so then he just, you know, as little kids do, kind of dismiss it and move on. And but those were all signs that became important to me to keep checking in, because then, of course, on a very regular basis, you go to a restaurant and the waiter or the waitress comes, the server comes and says, "Hey, buddy," you know, or "Hey, little man," or whatever. And so periodically I would check in and say, does it bother you that they say that? Do you like it? That, like, I was trying to offer different doors, you know?
You were like cracking the door open every time, allowing them to feel comfortable.
100%, because truly it does not matter to me. What matters is you feel as loved and accepted and comfortable as you possibly can. And if you can tell me, give me some clues as to what that is, like, I'm on it. I will support that.
You know, and this goes back to, you know, I'm noticing how important the value of authenticity is for you, Dena, right? And for your family. It's like
100%.
You know, foundational. Yes.
There is nothing more important.
You
know, the more we have to tamp down who we are, and, you know, that the harder things are. So
how has, with all of this, you know, and we can talk about, you know, the stage of his transition, where it's at, but how has his fierceness kind of supported your fierceness? What has that experience been like, or how has that showed up for you?
It's inspiring. And let me say, both of, there's nothing more inspirational to me than our children. Like, it can make me cry because, but fierce looks different in both of my kids. So my older son is also a Pisces. And his fierceness is not as explosive or as loud as literally or figuratively as my younger son. My younger son is the, like, screamer, and the, like, coming home from the hospital, my mom and dad were there. My mom was there helping, and he was crying, and my mom was like, "Oh my God, is he okay?" And I was like, I think this is just it. Like, this is just how he cries. And my older son was not, like, he was the happiest, you know, like,
probably singing himself to sleep.
Yes, like, easygoing. He still is, like, he rolls with it like nobody I've seen. But it's interesting, right? Having both kids and having this very, like,
that kind of reminds me of my sister and I. I'm a Pisces, she's an Aries. We're very, very, you know, in that.
That's exactly what my two are.
Okay, there you go. Like, I see it so clearly. Like, I was just the gentle one, and she was like the rocket ship.
Totally. So it has been important to me in the transition to keep trying to keep the conversation open. to say like, are you okay? Do you need to talk about this with us, with somebody else? How are you feeling about this? And so, very different natures, and also like the teenage thing on top of that, which life is just awkward for, all those years. And so his fierceness really shows up in, I think, how he is inclusive and just rolls with it. And some of that is generational too. Like watching his friends, they're all like, oh, okay, your name's Parker now? Okay, cool. There is just, it's not a thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. Amazing, Dena. And which I'm sure has helped you kind of relax into it a little bit more, even though have you had to put on this advocate hat for like advocating for him? Has that had to happen? Mm-hmm.
Yes. With the school system, particularly, because we haven't officially undergone, we're dealing with name change and all other, like the legalities of this. And so there's definitely is a part where you have to go in and say, okay, here's what's needed and all of that. And it's, thankfully, we have had really great reception. So if there is, if people are not, whatever their belief system is, it has not shown up as a roadblock for us at this point, thankfully. And people have been really wonderful about that. But it's definitely a whole different level of advocacy. Living in the state of Florida, where everyone who is not cisgendered or white is under attack, basically.
It is true. Yes.
So there are definitely those kinds of things that you feel it and you see it around you. And so it's, it's definitely present. Thankfully, it has not been in the immediate sphere of what we've had to contend with.
Yeah, I think our world right now, for me, it's part of the Aquarian age. I really believe that the young kids we have given birth to are here to help us make the changes that we're seeing now that are very uncomfortable. And it's a new territory. We all have to kind of have our own levels of fierceness, however we define it, to be able to move these things forward. And what an incredible source of light he is, and you are, and your husband and your older son, for really creating this space for him to live authentically, to show up as who he is and who he desires to be, with such conviction.
Absolutely.
So beautiful, Dena. I think you're going to inspire so many people. I have other friends who are going through the same thing. And I think we're going to keep hearing more and more stories of this happening, as we become fierce for our children. And part of that is really just seeing them for who they are, creating the space for them to be who they are, and deal with whatever internal stories we feel and we're experiencing because of how we were raised, because of how we had different tendencies. So I want to transition a little bit, because a big part of these conversations with women is, so how has your spirituality supported you, and what does your spiritual practice look like, right? Because it looks so different for everybody, and there's no right or wrong. And that's one of the things I want to keep, convincing people, like, you don't have to sit in Zen and, chant every morning in order to be spiritual. Like, it shows up so differently for everybody. I love that, that you are a Deepak, Chopra meditation teacher, and I love seeing that journey for you. So so how has all of the spirituality supported this transition?
Yes. I think finding whatever the God of your understanding, the spiritual practice of your resonance is so critically important. It's the shadow and the light piece, right?
Yeah.
So we have been so fortunate with how it has been received in our own families, with our, like in telling our friends, when everything, when Parker kind of everything tumbled out as a like, yes, here's this, and I want these pronouns, and this is my name, and all of that. We have really wonderful friends who were like, oh, that's great, congratulations, like you weren't surprised, right? Like anybody who knows us and who knows Parker,
they saw it coming.
Oh yeah, so we were welcomed into this very loving fold of our chosen friends and family and all of that. So that's great. You can't also, though, dismiss the fact that there's grief, right? Because there's expectation. And so the spiritual practice of feeling the feelings and grieving, the loss of what your perception was, right, of this child that you had, and one of the interesting parts of that is like Parker doesn't really want to see or acknowledge or any of that, like pre-transition photos, particularly before he cut his hair.
Wow.
So which that happened before he came out.
Yes.
So we would show like really cute videos of him as a baby or pictures, and he just would like get disgusted and broody and I didn't understand, because usually kids are like, oh my gosh, look at me, that's so funny. Right. He really struggled with, like, he did not want us showing that to other people. He didn't want to see it. He did, like, it was a complete, this is dead to me. And so as a mother, that's really hard, right? Yeah. Because you like,
it is a loss.
Yes.
You're grieving something that you thought. And I love the way you said it, Dena. Like, I just think this shows so much evolution, right? Of being able to say, I'm not grieving the loss of my daughter. I'm grieving the loss of the perception. Like, I get goosebumps right now hearing that. Like, that is so, so powerful. And what a wonderful way for you to speak to yourself in a way that really honors that, again, what you said, it's Parker's soul. It's not the outer shell, right? Which was the photos, which was the dresses and the bows and whatever, the dolls.
It's grieving my expectation of what I thought our journey was going to be together. So there's been great lessons of other relationships, like, there's this idea of depression is, our thoughts and our expectations that were unfulfilled, that we are dealing with what happened in the past. Anxiety is the deal, trying to deal with what hasn't happened yet. And so meditation takes you, like, meditation is, we are here, here now, in this moment. And so in terms of a spiritual practice, meditation is great for me for that. And I have, like, since college, have had this on and off relationship, right? With meditation, with yoga, with these other spiritual practices, what I now consider like fundamental spiritual practices for me. And there's always the like, oh, I would love to meditate, but I just don't have the time. Which I can't say without laughing now, because I did, like, the light bulb went off for me when I realized the moment that I say that is exactly the moment I have to stop. And even if it's for 5 minutes, sit in meditation. And so that became a game changer for me. And so my spiritual practice evolved beyond a Sunday service, into a daily, what are the daily rituals that keep us moving forward? Yes. So moving your body, being in nature, meditation, things that refill you to carry on. So conversations with friends, it can be going to have tea with somebody that, or, having a conversation with a friend that's uninterrupted by other things in life. So my idea of spiritual practice has shifted. And I've had to really cling to since leaving Kansas. So we had a spiritual community when we lived in Kansas, the Center for Spiritual Living, and they're all over. Like there are several in South Florida, and it is such a resonant practice. Their ideals, their philosophy. I was raised Catholic. There are things about the Catholic faith and about the Mass that I love. It feels like going to your grandma's house, right?
Yeah,
like
it sure does. Yeah.
You wouldn't necessarily want to live there, but you love visiting and it feels familiar and homey. And, I went through all the way up through confirmation and all of that, I've done the sacraments up to that point. And so there were great things about that. The part where I had to diverge was getting married and then getting divorced.
Yes.
And then just dismissal of like the dogma, I guess.
The dogma.
Of
You and I are equally on the same pace with that. And and so today that, do you find yourself still going to church or,
So we don't. So this spiritual community that that when we moved, we still keep up with them. Thank goodness for Facebook and but it was the first time I had gone to a church. I told my husband after we discovered it and started going and taking the kids, I felt it felt like an insult to call it a church, which sounds sacrilegious, I guess, but it's a community of people. It is the most diverse religious institution I had been a part of. The way that they talked about and treated children was unparalleled.
Right.
They, at the end of the service, so the children would be in their own groups while we were in a service, and we sang this song at the end of every service, and the kids came in and they came to the front, and it was acknowledging and honoring how important our children are.
Right.
And it was the first time in any kind of spiritual community like that I had seen such diversity of race, of parental, relationships, and children with special needs. Like it was a y'all come, to use the Southern.
We're all one.
Southernism.
We're all together.
Everybody's welcome.
Yeah. Everybody.
And it was, it's a non-denominational. It is a spiritual. I am God and you are God, and everything
God
around
is in
us.
All of us. We all have the
unity of it all. It's that kind of community, and so turns out that's really hard to find.
It is. I became attracted to Unitarian, for that reason. And I remember once, I went all the way through to confirmation as well in order to get married. Although I left the Catholic school and Catholic church, right around 7th grade, it just did not resonate with me. Although anytime I go into a place that is religious, I feel the presence of God, right? And so, I got to a point where I was like, I want everything to feel inclusive, because I don't feel I'm different than anybody, regardless of, race or gender or religion. And it felt so nice to be, like you said, in a space where everybody was deemed equal, and it was just a practice of love, and
Yes.
gratitude and supporting each other and our children. I remember going once to, I can't remember what kind of you know, dogma it was, but in that place, my daughter was allowed to take the bread of Christ. And I was like, oh my goodness, how beautiful that she didn't have to have a sacrament,
Right.
you know, in order to be
Right.
cleared, in order to feel the presence of God within her, right? And so that's when things started really shifting for me. So so yeah, I'm with you on that. It sounds yeah, and I think a lot of people are beginning to feel those shifts within themselves and not feel the fear really that
Yes.
religion pours on us, right? That if we don't do
That's it.
X or Y or Z,
Yes.
then we're evil and you know gonna go to hell. So
right. Right. If it all comes down to really, like, you know, the basis of everything is either love or fear.
Love or fear.
And you know, I'm a proponent of love every time.
Exactly. So we're about 10 minutes to the hour. I want to talk about what you're doing with Chopra.
Yeah.
And because it's really exciting that, you know, there are many Chopra meditation teachers. It sounds to me like you are quite close, you know, to him because of the center that he's created.
Yes.
You know, in your area. So what does that look like?
Sure. Yeah, the Mind Body Zone opened. It's at the Lake Nona Performance Club. And Lake Nona is a little burb of Orlando, basically. Okay. It's very close to the airport, right off of 417. And Lake Nona Performance Club is a state-of-the-art. It's not just a health club, so it is really it focused on preventative and longevity. You know, one of the things about Deepak's message, I think that's so profound, is he really is invested in mental health, in research about longevity and how do we live our best, most productive, not even productive, but how do we feel the joy and the love and have the best experience we can possibly have.
And the idea as well that we can heal ourselves, right?
Yes, the commitment to the physical and the mental and the spiritual and how all of those work in concert with one another. So I went to a Deepak retreat in 2019 before the pandemic with a friend, because we were our friend Andrea, who's another one of our
conversation with a few weeks ago.
Yes. We went together to that. We were on the phone and we had both gotten an email about this retreat. And I was like, man, I would love to go to one of those. And she was like, I would love to go too. We should go together. So we ended up, you know, on a lark deciding, okay, we're going to go. So we went to the Infinite Possibilities retreat that was in Santa Fe. And not surprisingly, it was a transformative experience. If you have the chance to hear him speak in person, he is just has such a presence, I think, and such wonderful wisdom and has just such humility. You know, one of the things I've heard him say many times is we are above no one and we are below no one. It really is it makes me think of the Ram Dass, you know, we're all just walking each other home kind of mindset. And so, so it was a great, the whole retreat was really wonderful for me. And we went to a lunch that they had talking about primordial sound meditation. So primordial sound meditation is this idea that we each, it kind of sounds a little like astrology in terms of your birth date, time, place, determine what your primordial sound is. It's the resonance,
the frequency that you were born into.
Exactly. And so when you use primordial sound meditation, you're given your mantra that corresponds to your birth date, time, and place. And then you learn to meditate using that, with this idea that it really circumvents all the noise and takes you back to the essence of who your soul and your arrival in this time space continuum and on this planet at this time.
Home. It takes you home.
Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
It does. So that idea of flow, that has been true for me. So I enjoyed learning how to meditate that way, and then ended up going on and doing the course to become a primordial sound meditation teacher.
Beautiful.
And at the time that I signed up for that, it was before the pandemic. And I thought, why am I doing, I don't know if I'm going to be a meditation teacher, who knows, but it just was of interest to me. And all of the readings and, I guess you don't end up getting a PhD without being sort of addicted to learning and all of that, case in point, I guess.
I know.
Yes, these are all real books. This is not a screensaver. And yes, I've read most of them. And so, just the learning part of it was super interesting to me. And so I went through and I finished the certification in the midst of the pandemic. Wow. And so it was great for my own meditation practice, but that was it, right? That's where it all kind of ended. And then February of 2021, I get this email that says, hi, I'm with the Chopra Center or with Deepak Chopra in California. And I would love to talk to you about your meditation teaching, whatever. And I emailed back and I was like, oh, thanks so much. There's not much to tell about my meditation teaching because I haven't been teaching, I've been practicing. So in having a conversation, I learned that they were opening the mind body zone here. And so the opportunity presented itself to then actually go in and lead meditation, and now the opportunity to teach primordial sound meditation. And that has then also, because of my music therapy background, led to the sound healing components. And so it feels like this really beautiful collision of old and new. And
love that collision. Yes.
Sort of I guess, in keeping with the fierce theme, it has also brought up in me insecurities about,
when I do this, am I worthy?
Right. Yes. Do I know enough? Do I, so, and it feels amazing to be a student again, to have that beginner's mind. And, I think as we age, a lot of times, my friends and I have these conversations of like, wow, wouldn't it be great to be like 20 again, but know what you know now and have, be as resourced then.
The wisdom of that. The wisdom of that. Oh my goodness.
So
I love that.
It feels Dena. A little like that.
Yeah. And part of flowing, because there's so many aspects that I, teach people about, what flow is. And of course, I match that to their astrology, their human design, because we're all very different and we operate differently. But I know that for me, based on my human design and my astrology, that it's really about, yes, listening to the impulses of the heart, of the spirit, and then waiting for the universe to present you with the opportunity, and then saying yes, quieting the voice that says, oh, I'm not worthy, and saying, wow, okay, look at the synergistic, the collision, right? And will I allow myself to step into it, right? So how beautiful that you've gone with that flow, that you've allowed yourself to step into. And it really is a mirroring of who you have been and who you are now becoming. And also how that, I can only imagine, supports Parker and your whole family, right? And so I can't wait to see like what this leads to. And I want to close by just giving you an opportunity to let people know like how they can reach you, because I know a long time ago, I feel like I got a mantra. It wasn't primordial, it was a different type, but I'm like, you know what, I need to do that again. So I'm going to reach out to you so we can do that.
Yeah.
I want to get my sound, and I love
Yeah.
chanting, and I love like using meditation where I'm focusing either on a
Yeah.
sound or on a word. So I think it'll benefit me. But
Yeah.
how can we stay in touch with you? And I know you've been doing some monthly sound bowl healings and meditations. So I want to invite all the ladies to like join what you're doing. So
Yes, that would be great. So we're on socials under enlighten_CE. And I'm on socials as well. And then I'm best probably reached by email too, but social media channels work as well too.
at Enlighten CE. Okay.
No, it's actually deregister at cbmt.org.
Deregister. I'm going to type it in here. Deregister
Okay.
at
cbmt.org.
cbmt.org. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All right, my friend. This has been such a joy. I can speak to you for hours.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been so much fun for me personally, but fun to talk about. It's interesting because I don't feel like I don't really get to, I haven't had the opportunity to unpack all of this really either.
Yeah. And
just
thank you for
in
being
little
so
ways.
open and vulnerable and sharing a part of your life that
Yeah.
is very private, and because you're doing that, I know that it's going to support so many people who may be going through the same thing, and having an example, right, of how to flow through that, and to define the way that we want to be fierce in whatever situation we may be going through. So love and light to you, sweet sister.
Thank you.
And have a beautiful rest of your week, and we will catch up soon. And thank you, everybody who joined us live today or who watches this recording. We're grateful that you've given us the space as well.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.